Yeah, Democracy Game Night is an activity or a program that we thought would be a fun way to talk about our North Carolina Democracy exhibit, which is a brand new exhibit here at the Greensboro History Museum. You know, one of the things that we thought when we were putting together the exhibit is how much of in some ways, democracy is a little bit of a game, right? You got to learn how to play, and some people learn how to play and win, and some people play and lose, and sometimes the rules change. But there's a lot that's similar to games, and we thought it would be a really fun way to explore different ideas about democracy by using games. And we found all kinds of cool board games that are that teach different things about civics or about being the president, or there's sort of one that's almost like a Cards Against Humanity version of election and being and democracy in our government kind of questions like that. So it was fun to kind of bring together a lot of the different games. When originally our Project Democracy initiative started back in 2019, one of the first things we did was to do a gerrymander madness VR game. So we worked with a developer in Durham to put that together. So, you know, even for a couple of years, we've been using that as a way to explore how the right to vote can change when people kind of shift the rules around here in the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, I remember you opening that up a while back, and that was kind of cool. You've changed it. The game's changed up a little bit.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's interesting. So, you know, I mean, we had to close it down for COVID for so long, and we've just kind of reopened it recently, and it's interesting to be able to come back to it. You know, so much has happened in the couple of years since we started that, you know, with brand new redistricting after the 2020 census, all those court battles about the district lines here in North Carolina, and actually for the first time in a long time, an expert panel created map rather than a legislature created map of the North Carolina congressional district boundaries. So that's an interesting question. You know, there's a Supreme Court case that's coming up that is going to have a really important decision about what role the state legislatures have in setting electoral boundaries and election laws versus what roles the courts and voter referenda have in making those changes. So, you know, it couldn't be more timely. I mean, it remains
right,
relevant.
And that's something that has been a continual battle for years. I've heard about it, and it's just, I guess you bring up an interesting topic, which is like, you know, who's to say what a district line is and what a voting line is for who.
Yeah, and it's to different people's advantages. And, you know, part of the exhibit, we look at the 2010 election, which was kind of a pivotal one in North Carolina. For so long, it had been the state legislature had been controlled by the Democratic Party, and the Democrats had set those lines to their advantage for years and years and years. Had set, had sort of organized districts to help their candidates. After 2010, first time in something like nearly 100 years, the Republicans control the state legislature, and of course they say, okay, now it's our turn, and we're going to change some of those boundaries around to have an advantage to our candidates. So that's the challenge when you have an elected group with a goal of maintaining their own
no bias
thing,
no bias at all.
Maintaining their own their own superiority, setting the boundaries. And it comes back to games, right? It's like, oh, we're gonna shift the rules when we're in charge to help our side, and then when the other if the other side gets in charge, they're like, nope, we're going to shift them back because that's what you did. So there's so much back and forth, and it's an interesting thing to explore. I think it's an important thing for people in North Carolina to understand. And as a history museum, we want to try to convey that understanding to people in an interesting way.
Tell me about some of the games you have laid out here tonight.
I'm really looking forward to our scavenger hunt tonight. We've got clues that are all over the museum, so I can't wait to see kind of people scampering around and getting lost and trying to figure out where they're supposed to go to find their next clue. And we've got some democracy trivia. Then we found some different. We found some different board games just on the internet, trying to see, what's out there. So one of them is called I Dissent, and you have to pretend like you're a Supreme Court justice and to make a decision around a really, really important issue, like, is fried chicken a vegetable kind of thing. So, it's, the games are kind of fun and goofy and irreverent, but they also kind of get to how decisions get made among groups of people, right? That's one definition of democracy.
Mm-hmm. And you have a food truck, Little Brother Brewing is here.
We do, we wanted to make it festive. We wanted to make sure that people after work could come grab a bite to eat and get a drink if they wanted to, have a good time, because, museums and good times should go together, rather than, it being sort of the health food of your experience day. We can also be a little bit of junk food as well. So I think that can be fun for us as an organization, to try to bring in new people, try to give somebody a double take maybe about if they had a conception of what the museum was like as a kind of stuffy place, that we're open to new ideas and doing some fun things in different ways.
Give me an introduction to this exhibit here.
So this exhibit here is called North Carolina Democracy, 11 Elections, and we picked 11 different North Carolina state elections between 1776 and 2010 that kind of tell the story of choices and change across North Carolina that have shaped our democracy to what it is today. And we found some just fascinating stories, and not just from here in Greensboro, but really from across the state. We look at Hillsborough in 1776, where the guys were coming together to try to get elected to write the first state constitution. And we look at Asheville in 1920, where they're electing the first woman legislator in the state, not just in the state, but in the whole Southeast. And this is a woman who wins the primary in Buncombe County even before women have the right to vote. So it's there's a lot of firsts and a lot of upheaval and changes, and it comes all the way right up to today. So almost to today, 2010. That's nearly a decade ago. It is the most recent election we looked at, but we also want to encourage people to see how all those elections kind of build up to the the same kinds of choices and change that we have to make. Whether just this week we had a municipal election in Greensboro, got another one coming up in November, that's a national election, midterm, so it's important, I think, for all of us to be aware of the power of the vote and the importance of the vote and how our choices can change our society and our state.
I believe Nancy won by like 300 votes or something.
I think it was very thin, So I mean, it was a very tight election in the city. Not, I think in some ways, voter turnout was kind of changes what that's going to be. So people's votes counted, right, in this kind of weird July election. But people's votes count even in the biggest elections. The presidential ones always draw out the most people, but midterms are really important, and local and state elections, state contests are really important. And I think it's hard for people to keep an eye on all those. I mean, it takes a little time to really evaluate the different candidates and to know what those boxes you're checking when you go into the voting booth are. But that's really critical to, who we are as a country, who we are as a state, who we are as a city.
If I'm not mistaken, your goal here is to spark an interest in voting or the history of voting.
Yeah, we certainly want people to feel like when they get through here that voting is an important act and a critical act that they can take part in. It's the one we really focused on for democracy. And of course, that's not the only part of democracy. Protesting is part of democracy. Writing to your elected officials is part of democracy. Taking part in your neighborhood is part of democracy. There's so many different ways that people can make a difference, can kind of contribute to change and kind of work to push their society, their neighborhood, their city in the direction they want it to go. But it takes working together, and it takes commitment, and it takes being informed and having some knowledge. So those was what we wanted to convey by looking at. Yeah.
Why is it important that we pay attention, that we come here and we observe?
Yeah, no, it's a good question but I think the past is hard to ignore and easy to ignore at the same time. The decisions that the people made previously affect us in unbelievable ways that we couldn't, that they couldn't even necessarily see. But that was one reason we wanted to focus on choices and change for each of these elections, because people had choices in front of them. They were aware of things. I think, sometimes people say, say for instance, slavery was, accepted and people really didn't have a choice. But people did have a choice, and they, there's enough documentary evidence that people know that it was a moral decision at the, in the antebellum era, and that people were conflicted about it. But a lot of times the powerful still made choices that sustained that institution. That continues to affect our society today. 150 plus years on. So I think it's important, but to communicate those things at the same time as understandable as somebody who's just trying to go about your business during the day. You don't necessarily want to feel the weight of history on your shoulders all the time. So we try to break it down so it's something you can kind of think about and be able to reflect on here at the museum. And tonight at Democracy Game Nights, it's something you can kind of play around with, and and maybe use some of the board games or the activities to imagine how that's important, or how your decisions might weigh on the future.
fun. It was very fun. It was challenging. I mean, I've been to the museum a number of times, and it tripped me up a couple of times. But you were on top of it too. You remember.
I was running everywhere, and I got out of breath.
Yeah, you did get breath. It was fun. That was a really good scavenger hunt and a fun one to look at. I think they did a great job getting everybody around. So it was cool.
It was kind of some of the clues were kind of challenging.
They were, yes, definitely. I mean, even knowing the museum and kind of knowing some of the history, it was like, oh, okay, well, that's a new one. I don't know, and especially with the new NC Democracy exhibit, which is it's new since April. I wasn't as familiar with that one. There were a couple of clues in there that stumbled me a little bit. So.
It makes you realize how big this place is.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. Yes, yeah, 3 stories. We were going up and down stairs and got a lot of steps in, but yeah, it's a big building, very well planned out, which is great.
Harper, what was your favorite part of this?
I just really like looking at the exhibits when we kept going and finding exhibits. I really like the city area upstairs, so I loved whenever we got to go up there. So.
You always like the doll houses?
I love the doll houses. Gosh.
Doll houses are really great.
And I got to see a glimpse of one when we were running.
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on. You're okay. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna do okay.
That was mine.
Slow is fast. Fast is slow.
A wedding picture you should see. As a pioneer lawmaker, I was never afraid to speak. I strive for equality in every action, working for the people and for the voters' satisfaction. Pioneer lawmaker. Downstairs.
And a picture of
A wedding picture.
A wedding picture.
Wedding picture you should see.
There's in there. There was.
That's it. Oh, let me see. I'm gonna think about this. A wedding picture you should see. As a pioneer lawmaker, I was never afraid to speak. I strive for equality in every action, working for the people and for voter satisfaction.
Downstairs.
What was downstairs?
That's like the house. Was it?
I'm not sure if that was it.
My mark says, I'm like, I'm asking questions.
I can make them more vague.
Right there.
Oh!
And he was disgruntled over voter something.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Because he was an Air Force veteran and a law school graduate, but they said he couldn't read.
Oh my
I remember hearing that. Yes.
Yeah, I heard that on NPR. Couldn't read and therefore couldn't vote. That is
Why is it important for to have events like this to be take an interest in history, especially for young people?
I think, but just from my perspective, and I'll let you answer too. I think it's important to know where you came from, where the city came from. What I think you understand yourself, you understand your fellow citizens, and you understand the city that you live in better if you know the background and where everything came from. So,
I was gonna say the same thing. I just feel like it's really good to have exhibits from the whole however when Greensboro was started and from now, how they change the exhibits every year, I think. I don't know.
every so often, yeah.
And I just really like how they have so many exhibits to choose from, and it's really important for youngins like us to learn more about where we are.